Hello and welcome to today's lesson on the passive. We're going to start our lesson with a quiz, so take out your notebooks and follow along with me. You will see 4 questions, and all I'd like you to do is try to think of the correct answer. You have 15 seconds. Okay, let's check your answers. The first one, the Mona Lisa was painted by Leonardo da Vinci. Guardians of the Galaxy was directed by James Gunn. The first modern Olympics were held in 1896. Penicillin was discovered by Alexander Fleming. Okay, that was easy, right? You'll see the exercise again, but this time I have removed the verbs for you. Don't go back to the beginning of this lesson, just try to fill in the gaps with the correct verb form. Okay, now let's check your answers. The Mona Lisa was painted by Leonardo da Vinci. Guardians of the Galaxy was directed by James Gunn. The first modern Olympics were held in 1896. Penicillin was discovered by Alexander Fleming. So all of these sentences, as you might have noted, are in the passive form. And how is this formed? Basically, we need the auxiliary verb be, in this case they are all in the past tense, and the past participle. So the Mona Lisa was painted. Now this is very important. We need to take note of the subject, if it's in the plural or singular form, as the verb must match the subject. So if we look at the third example, the first modern Olympics were held in 1896. Now let's have a look at this sentence. James Gunn directed Guardians of the Galaxy. Who's the subject of this sentence? James Gunn. The verb is directed and the object is Guardians of the Galaxy. SVO, subject, verb, object. Now that sentence is in the active voice, and the focus is on the doer, on who created or who invented or who is doing the action. Now if we had to look at this sentence, Guardians of the Galaxy was directed by James Gunn. The focus now is on the what was created, on the object, which is Guardians of the Galaxy, the film. We have the verb, so auxiliary be in the past, singular was, and the past participle, directed. And notice that there's a word over there, by. By is introducing the doer, who created the action, James Gunn. So that sentence is in the passive voice. We can say that the active voice shows what something does, who created the action, and the passive voice shows what happens to something, or who is receiving, or what is receiving the action. Let's have a look at another example. The school was built in 2005. Do we know who built the school? No, maybe we're not interested. We don't care that much on who built the school, but we're focused on the school, on the object. Let's have a look at this sentence. The government built this school in 2005. That's in the active voice. The subject is the government, the verb is built, and the object is the school. If we had to change this in the passive voice, we're focused on the what, on the object, which becomes our subject. This school was built, remember, be plus past participle, in 2005, without mentioning the doer. If we want to mention the doer, remember, we add that word. What's that word? It's by. So this school was built by the government. The school is receiving the action, the government is doing the action, and the doer is mentioned by that word, by. A common mistake that English learners tend to make, and which is imperative for using the passive and all other tenses effectively, is that of the subject-verb agreement, which I have mentioned earlier. It's just as it sounds. The subject and the verb in English sentences must match. So, for example, if we have a look at the first sentence, valeta, that's singular. It takes a singular verb form, is, and the past participle form of the verb, visited by several tourists. Valletta is visited by several tourists. But look at the second sentence. The rooms, so it's more than one, it's plural, were painted last week. This is for you. Avatar was or were directed by James Cameron. Do we have a singular or do we have a plural noun over there? It's a singular noun, so we need the singular verb form. Avatar was directed by James Cameron. Avatar and Titanic was or were directed by James Cameron. We have two this time, two films. So Avatar and Titanic were directed by James Cameron. So for all tenses, the form of the passive can really be summarized as be and the correct number and tense. So if it's present, if it's past, if it's perfect, and the past participle. So for example, is visited, Valletta is visited by several tourists. Were painted, the rooms were painted last week. Has been decided, it has been decided. Now, let's have a look at the form. The passive can be used with present tenses, past tenses, and future tenses. Let's start with the present, and we're going to look at the simple tense, the progressive or continuous tense, ing, the perfect, and the perfect progressive or perfect continuous tense. In the active, we would say she drives. The passive, the car is driven. She's driving. The car is being driven. She has driven. The car has been driven. She has been driving. And we don't normally use the perfect progressive in the passive tense, so I have omitted that. Now let's look at the past. She drove. The car was driven. She was driving. The car was being driven. She had driven. The car had been driven. She had been driving, and we do not normally use this again in the passive voice, so I left that out. Now finally, the future. She will drive. In the passive, we would say the car will be driven. She will be driving. The car will be being driven, which is not used that much. She will have driven. The car will have been driven. And finally, she will have been driving for 3 hours. The car will have been being driven. It's not used that much in the passive. So as we can see, the passive and the active voices present two different windows onto the same event, but they are not the same in their meanings. Usually we use the passive because we have a reason to do so, and we're going to look at some of these uses. We can use the passive when we want to follow an impersonal or academic style, usually in formal writing. For example, you are advised to be at the examination center 30 minutes prior to the exam. What's important over there is the action, that you are there 30 minutes before, not on who is telling us to be there on time or 30 minutes before the examination starts. We don't know the doer. The notice board at school has been broken. We don't know who broke it, so that's when we can use the passive. Or we want to avoid mentioning the doer. The vase was broken. Probably it was my cat, Simba, who broke the vase, but as they say, you're innocent until proven guilty. We can also use the passive to create distance. Latecomers will not be admitted to class. Maybe it sounds better than I will not be admitting you to class if you're late. We can also use the passive when there is no specific reason or obvious doer. So almost everything was destroyed due to the strong winds. When there is no need to mention the doer, so scientists believe a cure for the disease will be discovered soon. And also to focus on what is done. This milk is specially formulated for babies or infants. So remember, we'll also use the passive to focus on who is doing the action with that word, by. So by plus the pronoun or the noun. For example, the Mona Lisa was painted by Leonardo da Vinci. Okay, over to you. We have 2 sentences in the active voice, and you're going to change those in the passive voice. Remember, the object of the sentence will become the subject of the sentence in the passive. I'm going to give you about 15 seconds to try these out. Okay, let's check your answers. All the jewelry has been stolen. We can say by the burglars, but it is unnecessary to mention that. A week after the test, the students will be informed about their results by the instructor. Now we're going to watch a short clip from Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. You can download this worksheet, read it, and try to fill in the gaps before we listen and watch the clip. Take your time. When you finish, you can go to the next clip and watch the video.